If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, you need to get a job. My son said it like he was reminding me to pick up groceries. No hesitation, no eye contact, just casual. Brittany was standing next to him with her arms crossed, leaning against the kitchen counter like she had already heard this conversation a dozen times. On the table between us was a thin folder, clean, neatly printed. The logo of a senior living facility sat right at the top. They had already done the research. I looked at the folder, then at my son, then back at the folder again. I raised him in this house. Every wall, every bill, every repair, I handled it. I still remembered the year the roof leaked and I couldn't afford both groceries and a contractor. We ate cheap for 2 months so I could fix it. And now I was sitting in the same kitchen, being handed options. "You're still healthy," Ethan added, like he was helping me. "There are part-time jobs everywhere. Retail front desk, something simple." Something simple. I nodded slowly. "Okay," that was all I said. Not because I agreed, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally understood something I should have seen a long time ago. This wasn't a conversation. It was a decision they had already made. I stood up from the table, pushed my chair in like I always did, and walked down the hallway to the basement stairs. No one followed me. No one stopped me. That part didn't surprise me either. My room was exactly how they liked it out of the way. Small bed, one lamp, a plastic laundry basket in the corner. I had moved down there about a year ago when Brittany said they needed more space upstairs. I didn't argue then either. I pulled my old blue suitcase out from under the bed. The zipper stuck for a second before it gave in. Same suitcase I used when I first bought this house back when everything I owned fit inside it. Some things don't change. I packed quietly. A few sets of clothes, my medications, a photo album I hadn't opened in years. I paused for a second when I picked it up, then put it in anyway. I left everything else. No dramatic decisions, no revenge packing, just the things I knew I wouldn't have to come back for. Upstairs I could hear them talking, low voices, probably about me, or maybe about dinner, hard to tell these days. When I came back up with the suitcase, Ethan looked confused. "What are you doing?" I set the suitcase by the door and grabbed my coat from the hook. "You said I need to handle my situation," I told him. "So I am." Brittany frowned. "Wait, you're leaving. Where are you going?" I slipped my arms into my coat slow and steady. "I'll figure it out." That seemed to bother her more than anything. "You can't just leave like that," she said. "We need to talk about this." I almost laughed at that. "We already did." Ethan took a step closer. "Mom, hold on. We didn't mean right now. We just meant you should start planning." "I am planning." I opened the front door. Cold air hit my face sharp and clean. For a second, I just stood there breathing it in. It had been a while since I'd stepped outside without asking where I was going or when I'd be back. Behind me, Ethan's voice softened. "You don't have to do this." That was new. I turned just enough to look at him. "I know." Then I stepped out. The gravel in the driveway crunched under my shoes as I walked toward the gate. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten. If anything, I felt lighter. Not better, not happy, just lighter. Like I had finally put something down. I reached the gate and pushed it open. It creaked the same way it always had. Some things really don't change. And then I heard it. A car pulling up. Not fast, not loud, just steady. It stopped right outside the gate, engine still running. I didn't turn around right away. I didn't rush. I just stood there for a second, my hand still on the cold metal before I looked up. I kept my hand on the gate a second longer, then stepped toward the car. The driver's side door opened and Daniel stepped out like he had all the time in the world. "Hi, Maggie." Same voice. Calm. Familiar in a way that didn't demand anything from me. "Hi," I said back. He looked at the suitcase, then at me. No questions. Just a small nod like he already understood more than I'd said. "You ready?" he asked. I exhaled. "Yeah." He took the suitcase from my hand without making it a big moment and placed it in the trunk. No dramatic gestures, no sympathy face, just simple help. That alone felt strange. I got into the passenger seat. The leather was cold, clean, nothing like the basement room I had just left. As we pulled away, I glanced at the house once, not because I wanted to stay, just to see if it would feel different. It didn't. It looked exactly the same as it had that morning. The only thing that had changed was me. I met Daniel when I was 20. Back then I had plans. Not complicated ones, just the kind that made sense: finish school, build something stable, maybe travel a little. He was part of that version of my life, easy to talk to, never rushed me, never made me feel like I had to prove anything. But life doesn't always follow plans that make sense. I met David a year later. My husband. The man I built a life with. The man I lost way too early. The accident happened on a rainy morning. I still remember the call. I still remember standing in the kitchen, holding the counter like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Ethan was 3. Too young to understand what was gone, but old enough to feel that something had changed. From that day on, everything became simple. Not easy, just simple. Take care of Ethan. That was it. I didn't think about what I wanted, didn't ask what I needed. Every decision came down to one question: would this help him? If the answer was yes, I did it. I worked mornings at the school, tutored in the afternoons, picked up extra shifts during the summer. I learned how to stretch a paycheck in ways no one teaches you. There was a winter where the heating bill went up so high I had to choose between that and replacing the old car battery. I chose the heat. We stayed warm. The car didn't start for a week. We managed. Ethan never went without what mattered. School supplies, clothes that fit, lunches that didn't make him feel different from other kids. I made sure of that. When he got older, I refinanced the house to help pay for his college tuition. Not the whole thing, just enough so he wouldn't start his life already drowning in debt. At least that's what I told myself. He used to leave me notes when he was little. Folded pieces of notebook paper, messy handwriting. Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to buy you a big house. I kept those notes longer than I should have, even after they stopped meaning anything. The first time I met Brittany, she shook my hand like she was closing a deal. Firm, quick, eyes already scanning the room. Nice place, she said, but it didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like an evaluation. Ethan was smiling the whole time like he had done something right. Mom, she works in real estate, he said, like that explained everything. It explained enough. At first, nothing obvious changed. That's how it usually works. Small things. Ethan stopped coming by as often. Calls got shorter. Visits turned into quick drop-ins instead of dinners. Then came the suggestions. Mom, you should think about updating the kitchen. Mom, the house has a lot of value now. Mom, have you ever thought about estate planning? That last one came from Brittany. We were sitting at the table. Same one where I'd signed permission slips and paid bills and helped Ethan with homework. It's just smart, she said. If something happens, probate can be a nightmare. I didn't know much about probate. Still don't, not in detail, but I knew she spoke like someone who had said this many times before. Ethan backed her up. It's just paperwork, Mom. We can put my name on the title. Makes everything easier later. Later. That word does a lot of work in conversations like that. I hesitated, not because I didn't trust him, because I didn't fully understand what I was agreeing to. But I trusted him. That was enough. We went to a small office downtown, signed documents I didn't read as closely as I should have. The woman behind the desk explained things quickly like it was routine. And maybe for them it was. For me, it was just another way to take care of my son. I walked out of that office still believing the house was mine. Just shared now. They moved in about a year later. At first it made sense. Ethan said they were saving for something bigger. Brittany said it would be temporary. Temporary has a way of stretching. Rooms changed, furniture moved. My routines adjusted around theirs. I told myself it was normal. Families do this. They make space. They compromise. The first time Brittany suggested I move into the basement, she said it gently. It's just more practical, she explained. You don't need the whole upstairs. She wasn't wrong. I didn't need it. I just didn't realize I was giving it up for good. Daniel drove without rushing. No music, no small talk filling the silence. After a while, he glanced at me. You don't have to explain anything right now, he said. I nodded. That's good, I replied, because I don't even know where to start. He smiled slightly. We've got time. Time. That was something I hadn't felt like I had in a long while. I leaned my head back against the seat and watched the road stretch out ahead of us. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what needed to be fixed, cleaned, or paid. I wasn't thinking about who needed me next. I was just sitting there, and it felt unfamiliar enough that I didn't know whether to relax into it or question it. I rested my hand against the window as the road stretched ahead, then let my mind drift back to the last year in that house. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't always understand. No one wakes up one morning and decides to push their mother out of her own home. It happens in pieces, small enough that you can explain each one away. At first, it was just adjustments. Brittany liked things organized. That's how she put it. She labeled shelves in the pantry, rearranged the kitchen so everything had a better system, moved my dishes to the lower cabinets because according to her, it made more sense. I didn't argue. It was still my kitchen, just different. Then came the notes. Sticky notes on the fridge. Please rinse dishes before putting them in the sink. Try not to leave lights on. Keep the thermostat at 68. They weren't rude, not directly. But they weren't suggestions either. They were rules. And somehow they didn't apply to everyone equally. Ethan left lights on all the time. Brittany took long showers. The house stayed warm when they wanted it to. But when I forgot something, even something small, it became a conversation. Mom, we're just trying to manage expenses, Ethan would say, like he was explaining a business decision. That word started to feel different. The day I moved to the basement wasn't dramatic. No argument, no raised voices. Brittany stood in the hallway holding a set of clean sheets. We were thinking, she said, it might be easier if you took the downstairs room. More privacy for everyone. Privacy? I looked at Ethan. He didn't look at me. It makes sense, Mom, he added. You don't use the upstairs much anyway. That part was true. I didn't use it much anymore, because it didn't feel like mine, so I nodded. Okay, that word again. I packed my things in small trips. A few clothes at a time, my books, my photos. No one helped, but no one stopped me either. The basement room was clean. Brittany had made sure of that. Fresh sheets, new lamp, even a small rug. It almost looked like they were doing me a favor. But favors don't usually come with a loss you can't name out loud. Life shifted after that. Meals changed. They stopped asking if I wanted to join them for dinner. Sometimes they'd eat out, sometimes they'd cook and leave leftovers in the fridge. Help yourself, Brittany would say. I did. Alone. I started eating at different times. Not on purpose, it just happened. Their schedule became the main one. Mine adjusted around it. Even the living room felt different. I used to sit there in the evenings, watch whatever I wanted, maybe read a book. After a while, I stopped going in unless they weren't home. Not because they told me not to, because I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore. Lily was the only thing that stayed steady. She'd come downstairs sometimes, usually when Brittany was on the phone or busy with work. She'd sit on the edge of my bed and talk about school, her friends, the small things that matter when you're 8. One afternoon, she looked around the room and asked Grandma, "Why do you live down here?" Kids don't soften questions. I smiled at her. It's quieter. She frowned. But it's dark. I shrugged lightly. I don't mind. She thought about that, then said, I like upstairs better. I know I told her. So did I. Ethan and I talked less. Not because we fought, because there was nothing left to say that didn't feel unnecessary. If I brought something up, it turned into logistics. Mom, we're just trying to make things work. Mom, you have to understand where we're coming from. I understood. That was the problem. I understood that I had become an adjustment, a line item. Something to manage. There was a night I remember clearly. Not because anything big happened, because nothing did. I was upstairs standing in the kitchen holding a glass of water. Brittany was on her laptop at the table, headphones in. Ethan walked past me, grabbed something from the fridge and headed back to the living room. Neither of them acknowledged me. Not even a glance. I stood there for a few seconds longer than I needed to, then set the glass down and went back downstairs. That was the moment it became clear. Not when they moved my things, not when they set rules, not even when they stopped including me, but when my presence stopped registering at all. The next morning I found a note on the fridge. Please remember to clean up after yourself. Shared space. I stared at it for a second. Shared space. I had lived in that house for over 20 years, paid every bill, fixed every problem, raised a child inside those walls. And now I needed a reminder that I was sharing it. I didn't take the note down. I left it exactly where it was. That evening, Lily came down again holding a drawing. It was simple, stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. That's you and me, she said. I looked at it, then at her. Where's your mom and dad? I asked. She hesitated. Then she pointed to the corner of the page where 2 smaller figures were drawn separate from the others. They're over there. Why? She shrugged. They're busy. I nodded slowly. Okay. She handed me the drawing. You can keep it. I will, I said. And I meant it, because at that point, it felt like the only thing in that house that still belonged to me. I watched the road for a while, then shifted slightly in my seat as the trees started to change. Ohio slowly gave way to something quieter. Fewer buildings, more space between things. The kind of place where no one is in a hurry unless they choose to be. Daniel didn't fill the silence. I appreciated that. After a while, he said, There's a place we can stop if you want coffee. Sure, I replied. Not because I needed coffee, because I needed a pause. We pulled into a small roadside cafe. Nothing fancy. A few trucks outside, a handwritten menu by the door. The kind of place where people know each other without asking names. Inside, it smelled like fresh bread and strong coffee. We sat by the window. Daniel ordered for both of us without making a show of it. "Still black?" he asked. I nodded. Still black. That made him smile. It had been decades, and he still remembered something that small. I didn't know what to do with that. Back in the car, I leaned my head against the window again. "You don't have to explain," he said once more. "I know, but you probably will anyway." I let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Yeah," I admitted. "Probably." I didn't start right away. I thought about where to begin, then realized there wasn't a clean place to start. There never is. "It wasn't one thing," I said finally. "It was a lot of small things that added up." He nodded, eyes still on the road. That's usually how it happens. When we reached Asheville, the sun was already starting to drop. Daniel's place wasn't what people imagine when they hear winery. It wasn't some massive estate with marble floors and a long driveway. It was quiet, a farmhouse set back from the road, rows of vines stretching out behind it, a wide porch with 2 chairs that looked like they'd been there for years. It felt lived in. Not staged, not impressive, just real. "This is it," he said. I looked at it for a moment before opening the door. Okay. Inside it was warm, not just temperature, the kind of warm that comes from a place that doesn't try too hard. Wood floors, simple furniture, books stacked in corners instead of lined up perfectly, a kitchen that looked like it was used, not displayed. "You can take the room down the hall," he said. "It's ready." Ready. I wasn't sure I was. Still, I walked down the hallway and pushed the door open. The room was simple. Clean bed, a small dresser, a window that looked out over the vines. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and a folded towel. Nothing extra? Nothing missing. I stepped inside, slowly setting my hand on the edge of the dresser. This wasn't my house, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was borrowing space. That night, we ate at the kitchen table. Soup, bread, something simple that didn't require conversation. We talked about things that didn't matter. The drive, the weather, a neighbor he mentioned who apparently had strong opinions about fences. At some point, he looked at me and said, "You can stay as long as you need. No conditions, no timeline. Just that." I nodded. "Thank you." I meant it more than I could explain. The first night was the hardest. Not because anything was wrong, because nothing was. No footsteps above me, no doors closing, no voices in the next room, no feeling like I had to stay quiet or out of the way. Just silence. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling wide awake. For years, my life had been built around someone else's schedule, someone else's needs, someone else's expectations. Now there was nothing. No one needed anything from me, and I didn't know what to do with that. The next morning, I woke up early out of habit. The house was quiet, the sun just starting to come through the window. I got dressed, walked into the kitchen, and stood there for a second before realizing something. I didn't have to ask if I could use anything. I made coffee. It felt strange, not the action itself, but the fact that no one was going to comment on it. No one was going to check how much I used or remind me to clean up. I poured a cup and stepped outside onto the porch. The air was cool, fresh. I sat down and took a sip. It tasted exactly the same as every other cup of coffee I'd ever had, but it felt different. Daniel came out a few minutes later holding his own cup. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Not really." He nodded like he expected that. "First night usually isn't." We sat there in silence for a while. Not awkward, just quiet. After a few minutes, I said, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "You don't have to do anything." I looked at him. "That doesn't feel right." He smiled slightly. "That's because you've spent your whole life doing things for other people." He wasn't wrong. "That doesn't mean you have to keep doing it," he added. I looked out at the rows of vines stretching across the land. For the first time in years, there wasn't a list waiting for me. No one expecting me to fix something. No one measuring what I contributed. Just time. And I wasn't sure yet if that was a gift or something I needed to learn how to carry. I set my coffee down on the porch railing when my phone started vibrating in my pocket. I almost didn't check it. Unknown number. For a second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. That would have been the easier choice. But something about the timing made me reach for it anyway. "Hello." There was a pause. Then I heard his voice. "Mom." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't recognize it. Because I did. I just hadn't heard it like that in a long time. "What is it, Ethan?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I didn't know if you'd pick up." I almost didn't. That seemed to land. I need to talk to you," he said. I leaned back slightly against the porch post. "About what?" There was a sound on his end. Movement. Maybe pacing. Brittany left. I didn't react. not out loud. Okay, I said. It's not just that, he added quickly. Things have been messed up for a while. Work's been unstable, and she had a deal fall through, and we've been arguing about money and… Ethan. He stopped. I don't need the full report. Silence again. This time heavier. I'm just saying it's been a lot. I'm sure it has… That wasn't sarcasm. Just fact. He exhaled slowly into the phone. I've got Lily here, he said, and I'm trying to figure things out, but I can't do everything at once. I closed my eyes for a second. There it was. Not an apology. Not I was wrong. Just reality catching up. What are you asking me? I said. Another pause. Then quieter this time. I need your help. The words came out like they had weight. I waited. I might have to take a temporary job out of state, he continued. Just for a few weeks. Maybe longer if it turns into something stable. And Lily, that's the problem. Of course it was. I can't take her with me right now, he said. And Brittany's she's not in a position to handle things. I almost asked what that meant, but I didn't need the details. I could already see the picture. I was thinking, he said carefully, maybe she could stay with you. Just until I figure everything out. Just… That word again. I let the silence sit between us. On the other end, I could hear him breathing, waiting. You're asking me to take care of her, I said. Yeah, the same person you told to get a job or go to a nursing home. He didn't respond. You remember that part, right? I added. I do. And now you need me. I do. At least he wasn't pretending otherwise. I looked out across the vineyard, the rows stretching into the distance. When I spoke again, my voice was steady. I needed you too, Ethan. He didn't interrupt. For a long time, I continued. Not for money, not for anything complicated, just basic respect. A conversation, a moment where I didn't feel like I was in the way. I know, he said quietly. I don't think you do. That came out sharper than I expected, but I didn't take it back. I messed up, he said after a second. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was funny, because it was small. 3 words to cover years of slow erosion. That's one way to put it, I replied. There was a shift in his tone. Not defensive. Not yet. More like tired. I'm not asking you to come back, he said. I know you won't. He was right. I'm just asking if Lily can stay with you for a while. There it was again. Not about me. About what I could do. I thought about Lily. The way she sat on the edge of my bed. The way she handed me that drawing. The way she lowered her voice when she talked about things she didn't understand but could feel. I wasn't thinking about Ethan anymore. I'll need to talk to her, I said. She's here! I heard movement on his end. Then a smaller voice came through. Grandma. That did something to me. More than anything Ethan had said. Hey, sweetheart, I replied. Her voice softened immediately. Where are you? I'm staying somewhere new for a bit. Are you coming back? I paused. No. She didn't say anything for a second. Then quietly, can I come there? Straight to it. Kids don't circle around things. Do you want to? I asked. Yes. No hesitation. Why, I said gently. Because you listened. That was it. Not because I bought her things. Not because I made life easier. Because I listened. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Okay, I said. I heard Ethan shift in the background. Thank you, he said quickly. Hold on, I replied. I didn't say yes to everything. Silence. I'll take care of Lily, I continued. But this isn't a reset. I know. You don't get to drop her off and disappear. I won't. And I'm not coming back to that house. I understand. I believed him. At least for now. There was one more thing sitting in the back of my mind. Something I hadn't brought up yet. Ethan, I said. Yeah. What's happening with the house? The line went quiet, longer than before. Then he cleared his throat. It's complicated. I almost smiled. Of course it is. Brittany wants to sell, he said. And you? I don't know if I have a choice. You do, I replied. He didn't answer that, because we both knew something he hadn't said out loud yet. That house didn't move without me. I'll call you later with details about Lily, he said. All right. And Mom. Yeah. I'm glad you picked up. I didn't respond to that. I just ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Then I picked up my coffee again, even though it had gone cold, and stood there for a second, staring out at the land in front of me. For the first time since I walked out of that house, I felt something shift. Not backward, just different. I set the empty cup down and reached for my phone again, this time already thinking about what needed to be done. Daniel, I called as I stepped back inside. He looked up from the kitchen counter. Everything okay? Lily's coming here. He didn't react right away, just nodded once. All right, he said. When? A couple days. Ethan has to arrange things. Daniel leaned back slightly, arms relaxed. Then we'll make space. Will? That word felt different here. Lily arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan's car pulled into the gravel driveway slower than usual, like he wasn't sure how close he should get. I stepped outside before he even turned off the engine. Lily opened the door before he could say anything and ran straight toward me. "Grandma." I caught her mid-run arms around her before she even slowed down. She held on tight. Not dramatic, not crying, just tight. "I missed you," she said into my shoulder. "I missed you too," I replied. Behind her, Ethan got out of the car. He looked tired, not in a way that comes from one bad night, but the kind that builds up over time. He walked over, hands in his pockets. "Thanks again," he said. I nodded. "Let's get her settled first." No small talk, no pretending. He seemed to understand that. The first few days were quiet. Lily followed me around like she was trying to relearn something she already knew, where things were, how the house worked, when it was okay to ask questions. She didn't need much. A place to sit, someone to listen, a routine that didn't change every other day. Daniel adjusted easily. He didn't try to act like anything he wasn't. Just introduced himself, showed her where things were, and let her decide how comfortable she wanted to be, too. By the second day, she was sitting across from him at breakfast asking about the vines. "What do they do?" she asked. "They grow grapes," he said. "I know that," she replied. "But what do you do with them?" He smiled. "We turn them into wine." She thought about that for a second. "Can I help?" "Not with the wine part," he said, "but maybe with everything before that." She nodded like that made perfect sense. I called her school in Ohio that same week, explained the situation. Temporary relocation, family arrangement. The woman on the phone asked careful questions. "Is there a custody order in place?" "Not yet." "Has the father authorized this move?" "Yes." There was a pause. "All right," she said. "We'll need documentation if this becomes longer term." "Of course." Nothing in life stays simple for long. 3 days later, I got the first letter. It came in a plain envelope, no return address I recognized. Inside was a formal notice. Brittany had filed a complaint. I read it once, then again. Interference with parental rights, emotional manipulation, unlawful retention of a minor. I set the paper down on the table. Daniel watched me from across the room. "Bad news?" he asked. "Expected news," I replied. He walked over, picked up the letter, and scanned it. "She's making a move," he said. "She always does." That evening, I sat with Lily on the porch. She was drawing again. Same style as before, simple lines, clear ideas. "Are you going back home?" she asked without looking up. "What do you mean?" "To Ohio." I leaned back in my chair. "No," I said. She nodded like she already knew the answer. "Good." That was all she said. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not a big firm, not someone flashy. Just a local attorney Daniel recommended. Someone who had handled family cases for years. His name was Victor Hale. He didn't waste time. "Tell me exactly what's happening," he said. So I did. From the beginning, not every detail, just the parts that mattered. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you want custody, or are you trying to avoid conflict?" "I want stability for my granddaughter." "Those are two different things," he replied. I didn't answer right away, because he was right. "Then let me ask it differently," he continued. "If the court asks you to send her back, will you?" I looked out the window at Lily sitting in the yard with a notebook in her lap. "No!" "All right," he said. "Then we're not avoiding anything." Things moved quickly after that. Paperwork, calls, requests for information. Victor explained everything in plain terms. "There will be an evaluation," he said. "They'll look at the child's environment, emotional state, school records, possibly interviews." "With Lily?" "Yes." I nodded slowly. "She'll tell the truth." "That's all we need," he replied. A week later, a social worker came to the house. She introduced herself, asked permission to look around, observe, ask questions. Lily sat across from her, feet swinging slightly above the floor. "Do you feel safe here?" the woman asked. "Yes." "Do you feel safe with your mother?" Lily hesitated. "Not long, just enough," sometimes she said. The woman wrote something down. After she left, Lily came and sat next to me. "Did I say something wrong?" she asked. "No," I told her. "You said exactly what you needed to." She nodded but didn't look fully convinced. "I don't want to go back there," she said quietly. I placed my hand over hers. "You're not making this decision alone." That seemed to settle something in her. Later that evening, my phone rang again. "Ethan," I answered. "She filed, didn't she?" he asked. "Yes." I told her not to. "That doesn't change anything." He sighed. "I don't want this to turn into something bigger." "It already is," I replied. Silence. "I'm not against you," he said finally. "I'm not doing this for you," I answered. That ended that part of the conversation. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a moment looking at the paperwork spread across the table. For years, I avoided conflict. Adjusted, stepped back, stayed quiet. This wasn't one of those moments. And for the first time, that didn't feel uncomfortable. I straightened the papers in front of me and slid them into the folder, making sure everything was in order before I closed it. Victor met us outside the courthouse. He wasn't dressed to impress. Just a clean suit-worn briefcase and the kind of expression that didn't change much no matter what was happening. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said. He nodded. "Good. That means you understand what this is." Daniel stayed quiet beside me, one hand resting lightly on my back. Not pushing, not guiding, just there. Inside, everything felt colder than it should have. Bright lights, hard floors, people moving with purpose but no emotion. Brittany was already there. Of course she was. Perfect hair, structured blazer, composed, like she was attending a business meeting instead of a custody hearing. Her lawyer stood next to her, flipping through documents. Ethan stood a few feet away from both of them like he hadn't decided which side he belonged to. He glanced at me once. I didn't react. We took our seats. Victor leaned slightly toward me. "Just answer what you're asked. Don't over-explain." "I won't." "You don't need to prove anything extra. Just be consistent." I nodded. That part I could do. The hearing started without ceremony. No speeches, no dramatic introductions. Just facts. Brittany's lawyer went first. He spoke clearly, confidently, laying everything out in a way that sounded organized, almost reasonable. "My client is concerned about the emotional well-being of her daughter," he said. "There has been a clear disruption in parental access, and we believe the child has been influenced to prefer an alternative environment." Alternative environment. That was one way to put it. He presented texts, short clips of conversations, pieces of things that on their own didn't look like much. That's how it works. You don't show the whole picture, you show enough to suggest one. Brittany sat still the entire time, occasionally nodding, occasionally lowering her eyes at just the right moment. If I didn't know her, I might have believed it. Victor stood when it was our turn. He didn't raise his voice, didn't try to overpower anything. He just shifted the focus. "Your Honor, we're not here because a grandmother overstepped," he said. "We're here because a child needed stability, and the only consistent option available stepped in. Simple. Clear." He called the school counselor first. She described Lily's behavior over the past year. Anxiety during transitions, she said. Difficulty adjusting after weekends. Increased comfort and participation when discussing time spent with her grandmother. No exaggeration, just observation. Then came the evaluation report. The psychologist's voice wasn't emotional, just factual. The child demonstrates a strong sense of safety and trust in her grandmother's care. There is no evidence of coercion or manipulation. That word mattered? No evidence? Then came the part I had been thinking about all week. Victor looked at me. "Margaret," he said, "can you explain your role in your granddaughter's life?" I stood. Not fast, not slow. "Just steady!" "I take care of her," I said. A few heads in the room shifted slightly like they expected more. Victor didn't interrupt. I continued. "I make sure she eats. I make sure she gets to school. I listen when she talks. I don't ask her to choose sides. I don't tell her what to feel about her parents." I paused. "I just make sure she feels safe." That was it. No speech, no performance. Brittany's lawyer stepped forward for cross-examination. "Mrs. Whitmore," he began, "would you agree that you removed the child from her primary residence without a formal custody agreement in place?" "Yes." "And that you made that decision without the mother's consent?" "I acted with the father's consent." He nodded slightly. "But not the mother's?" "No." He paced once. "Would you also agree that a child of that age can be easily influenced by the adult providing daily care?" I looked at him. "I would agree that children respond to how they're treated." That was enough. Ethan was called next. He looked uncomfortable the entire time. Not defensive, not aggressive, just stuck. "Do you believe your mother is capable of caring for your daughter?" his lawyer asked. "Yes." "Do you believe your daughter is safe in her care?" "Yes." No hesitation. That mattered. Brittany finally spoke. Her voice was controlled, measured. "I'm not saying she's a bad person," she said. "I'm saying she's overstepped. This is my child. I should be the one making decisions." That sounded reasonable? On paper. But reality doesn't live on paper. Victor didn't push back aggressively. He just asked one question. "Have you provided a stable living arrangement for your daughter in the past 3 months?" Brittany hesitated. "Not consistently," she admitted. That word again. Consistently. The judge didn't rush. He reviewed documents, notes, reports. The room stayed quiet in that particular way that only happens when everyone is waiting for something that can't be controlled anymore. Finally, he spoke. "The court's priority is the child's well-being," he said. No one moved. Based on the evaluations and current circumstances, temporary guardianship will remain with the grandmother. Brittany's posture shifted, just slightly. Enough to notice. Visitation will be permitted under supervision until further review. No emotion in his tone, just decision. I didn't react right away, didn't smile, didn't look around. I just stood there letting the words settle, not as a victory, as confirmation. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, but not in a dramatic way. Just clearer. Ethan walked over slowly. Thank you, he said. I looked at him. This wasn't for you. I know. For once, he didn't argue with that. Brittany walked past us without stopping, her lawyer close behind her. She didn't look at me. That was fine. There was nothing left to say that hadn't already been said in a room where it actually mattered. Daniel stepped up beside me. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Yeah. And for the first time, that answer didn't feel like something I was saying just to keep things moving. I rested my hand on the porch railing again that evening, watching Lily draw at the small table Daniel had set up for her near the window. She had already settled into a rhythm. School during the day, quiet afternoons, dinner at the same time every night. Nothing complicated, just steady. It didn't take much. It never did. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. That's not how it works. There were still calls, still paperwork, still the occasional message from Ethan asking questions he should have known the answers to by now. How do you handle her school forms? What does she usually eat for lunch? Do you think she needs tutoring? I answered when it mattered. Ignored what didn't, not out of anger, just boundaries. He visited a few times. The first time he stood at the edge of the porch like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to step all the way up. Lily ran to him anyway. That didn't change. Whatever had happened between the adults, she still saw her father the same way. Simple, direct, without conditions. I watched them for a moment, then stepped back inside to give them space. That was the difference now. I wasn't standing there trying to hold everything together. I was just part of it. Later that day, Ethan found me in the kitchen. I've been looking at options, he said, about the house. I didn't turn around right away. Just finished drying the plate in my hand and set it down. What kind of options? Refinancing, maybe buying out your share? I nodded. That would make sense. He shifted slightly like he expected resistance. You're not going to fight me on that, he asked. I looked at him. I'm not here to make your life harder. He let out a breath he'd probably been holding. I thought you might be. I'm just not going to fix it for you anymore. That landed. He didn't argue, didn't try to explain, just nodded. Brittany stayed out of it. Her visits with Lily were scheduled, supervised, structured in a way that didn't leave much room for interpretation. I didn't attend those. That wasn't my role, but I saw the difference in Lily afterward. Less tension, more clarity. Kids don't need perfect parents. They need predictable ones. Weeks turned into months. The house, Daniel's house, started to feel less like a place I was staying and more like a place I belonged. Not because anything changed physically, because I did. I stopped asking where things were before using them, stopped checking if I was in the way, stopped waiting for someone to tell me what I should be doing next. One morning, I caught myself making a list, not of responsibilities, of things I wanted to do. It was short, but it was mine. I started writing again. Nothing formal, just notes at first. Things I remembered, things I hadn't said out loud before. Small moments that didn't seem important at the time but made sense now. One of the first lines I wrote down was simple. The day my son told me to get a job was the day I stopped waiting for permission. I read it back a few times. It didn't feel dramatic. It felt accurate. Daniel found me on the porch one afternoon, notebook in my lap. What are you working on? He asked. Trying to make sense of things. He nodded. You usually do? I'm late to it, I said. He smiled. Or right on time? That sounded like something he'd been thinking for a while. Lily came outside a few minutes later holding another drawing. She handed it to me without saying anything. This one had 3 figures. Me, her, and Daniel, standing close together. No one off to the side this time. I looked at it, then at her. Where's your dad? I asked. She thought for a second. He visits, she said. That was her way of explaining it. Not complicated, just true. That night I sat alone for a while after everyone went to bed. No noise from upstairs, no footsteps I had to stay quiet for. No feeling like I needed to shrink myself to fit into someone else's version of a home. Just silence. The kind that doesn't press on you. The kind that lets you breathe. I thought about that night in the kitchen. The folder on the table, the way Ethan said it like it was nothing. If you don't want to end up in a nursing home, you need to get a job. At the time, it sounded like an ending, a final decision made about me without me. But standing there now in a place I hadn't even imagined for myself a year ago, it didn't feel like an ending anymore. It felt like a starting point I hadn't recognized. Sometimes people think walking away means giving up, that you're losing something. Maybe you are, but not always the thing that matters. Sometimes you're just leaving a version of your life that stopped being yours a long time ago. I didn't get louder. I didn't fight harder. I didn't try to prove anything. I just stopped staying where I wasn't wanted. And that changed everything. If someone ever looks at you and tells you that you're a burden, that you need to fix yourself to fit into their life, you don't always have to argue. You don't always have to convince them they're wrong. Sometimes the clearest answer is the one that doesn't sound like an answer at all. You stand up, you pick up what's yours, and you leave. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to win an argument. I didn't go back to prove a point. I just stopped staying where I was no longer respected. That's the part people don't always talk about in stories like this. They focus on the moment someone hurts you, the betrayal, the words you can't unhear. But what matters more is what you do after that moment. In my case, it wasn't about revenge in the way people expect. There was no dramatic comeback, no grand speech, just a series of decisions that slowly gave me my life back. I stopped being the person who fixed everything for everyone else. I stopped accepting less just because it came from family. And I stopped confusing sacrifice with love. That's what this really was. Not just a family betrayal story, not just a life story about starting over, but a quiet kind of revenge story, where you don't destroy anyone, you just stop letting them define you. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. If this story felt real to you, if you've ever been in a situation where family relationships or life didn't turn out the way you thought they would, then you're not alone. There are more stories like this, real, raw, and honest, right here on this channel. Subscribe to Hidden Lies for more family drama, true life story journeys, and powerful revenge stories that stay with you long after they end.